She was just 6 years old, a bright star, a beauty queen, and the center of a mystery that shattered the nation. JonBenét Ramsey's murder didn't just make headlines, it became one of the most chilling unsolved cases in American history. For nearly 3 decades, theories swirled, suspects came and went, and her family lived under a cloud of doubt. But now, after 28 long years, new forensic breakthroughs may finally bring this heartbreaking saga to a close. Groundbreaking DNA technology has uncovered evidence that was once invisible. And the revelations? They're darker and more unsettling than anyone ever expected. Is the killer someone we've known all along? Was the investigation deliberately derailed? And most importantly, will justice finally be done? Get ready, because the truth about JonBenét Ramsey has finally come to light. And it's not what anyone wanted to hear. But before we uncover the breakthrough that's shaking the nation today, we have to go back, 28 years, to the cold, haunting morning of December 26, 1996. What was meant to be a joyful holiday turned into a nightmare no family could imagine. 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey, a beauty queen with a radiant smile, was found dead in the basement of her family's upscale Colorado home. A garrote was lodged into her neck, a brutal homemade device used to strangle her. Her skull was fractured. And despite a chilling ransom note demanding $118,000, her lifeless body was inside the house the entire time. Her father, John Ramsey, was the one who found her, but instead of waiting for investigators, he carried her up the basement stairs, weeping. That moment alone ignited a storm of suspicion. From the oddly specific ransom demand to the complete lack of forced entry, the crime scene told a twisted, confusing story. And in the days that followed, all eyes turned to the people closest to her, her own family. The mystery only deepened, and America was left asking, what really happened that night? The investigation was a disaster from the start. The crime scene was compromised, evidence was mishandled, and the media frenzy turned the Ramsey home into a circus. For years, suspicion clung to the family like a shadow, with many convinced that someone inside the house was responsible. But then, in 2003, everything changed. Investigators uncovered a critical clue: mixed male DNA found on JonBenét's underwear. It didn't match John, it didn't match Patsy, and it didn't match her brother Burke. This DNA was uploaded into the FBI's CODIS database, and the results shook the case wide open. In 2008, the Ramsey family was officially exonerated by Boulder's district attorney, with the unknown DNA cited as the reason. But the story didn't end there. More unidentified male DNA was later found, on JonBenét's blanket, and even on the homemade garrote that ended her life. Traces the killer unknowingly left behind. And now, with modern forensic technology light years ahead of what was available in the 90s, those faint traces are speaking louder than ever. What was once considered unusable is now yielding real, undeniable profiles, and they might just lead us to the truth. The turning point in this decades-old mystery lies in a groundbreaking technique, forensic genetic genealogy, the same method that unmasked the Golden State Killer in 2018. This cutting-edge science merges traditional DNA profiling with vast consumer ancestry databases, offering law enforcement a new weapon against cold cases. And now, there's growing pressure to use it in the JonBenét Ramsey investigation. Her father, John Ramsey, has pleaded with police to retest crucial pieces of evidence, the ransom note, the garrote, the flashlight, and especially her clothing, at labs equipped to produce genealogy-ready DNA profiles. According to the family, everything investigators need to close this case is already in their hands. For nearly 30 years, the Ramseys have stood firm in their belief: the truth is buried in evidence already collected. What they're asking for now isn't speculation, it's science. And the question haunting everyone is simple: why hasn't it been done? John Ramsey met with Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redern and a genetic genealogy expert in January 2025. The meeting lasted about 90 minutes, and the three of them talked about how to use these new technologies to test the crime scene items again. Since then, Chief Redfern and other officials have said they are willing to work with the FBI and private labs. This shows that they are still committed to solving the case after all these years. John also said that they should use family DNA, which can help them figure out who did it with a 60 to 70% chance. Authorities in charge of the investigation have been hesitant, especially because of the problem of tainted evidence, which has caused the investigation to be put off over the years. But the government is still putting in place new testing rules, with help from the new leadership and public pressure from recent films. At the same time, John Andrew Ramsey, who is JonBenét's older half-brother, has come forward to say that this case can be solved. He said that people are still working on the case every day because they believe it will be solved in the end. The other day, John Andrew was interviewed and was honest about his family's personal history. After their sister Beth died in a car accident, they had to deal with the news that their mother Patty had stage 4 cancer. They had no idea that their family would be hit by another terrible tragedy. They were still dealing with the death of their sister when things got worse. Everyone thought they were involved in the murder. "We lost our sister and our daughter," he said. "The people we thought would guard and help us were the ones who blamed us. We were just normal people. Then all of a sudden, everything turned upside down." John Andrew also said that the family was finally freed after 10 years of defending themselves with DNA evidence in 2008. According to him, the only thing left is for police to quickly find the right person and begin charging them using modern forensic techniques. Both Ramseys agree that the cops already have the important DNA that hasn't been tested and other evidence that will finally solve the case. But they have to make a choice. But how did JonBenét's other brother, who was a major suspect, see things? Burke Ramsey, JonBenét Ramsey's brother, made news when he went on Dr. Phil for 3 parts and talked about his life after being quiet for almost 30 years. This was the first thing he said in public since the tragedy in 1996. He turned down every interview request, even ones from Netflix and other films. Burke finally spoke up when he was asked why. "If the story is going to be told, I want to tell it," he said. "I do not want people to talk about me. I'd rather tell my own story." His words show that he wants to take back control of the story after years of media attention. In the conversation, Burke strongly denied using any object to hurt his sister, which was different from what the news had said when the case first came to light. It was clear what he meant: absolutely not. He said that he stayed in bed the morning of the tragedy because he thought his sister was hiding. In the interview, they also talked about how the cops questioned him. Burke was scared and lost when he was 9 years old. Because he was so worried, he smiled when the police were questioning him, which they took as an indication of guilt. He did say, though, that it was just a feeling of pain and nerves. In the interview, Dr. Phil talked to Burke about the 911 call and played tapes that had never been shown before. He also asked him why he stayed in bed while the cops and his family were downstairs, and he talked about how shocked he was when he realized his sister was dead. But Burke has come up with his own idea about the case, and he too hopes that it will be solved soon. He thought that his sister's death was caused by an attacker or pedophile who was obsessed with beauty pageants, not his family. He said that he was hopeful that the case would be solved in the end, especially with the new DNA proof. The Ramsey family is no longer being looked at as a possible suspect in this 30-year-old case, so it looks like he was right. One of the strangest things about the JonBenét Ramsey mystery was that the cops first thought the parents, John and Patty Ramsey, were the main suspects. Investigators paid a lot of attention to the family because there were no signs of breaking in. The kidnap note was written on home paper and, by chance, talked about John's recent bonus. The police investigation was so focused on one thing that they missed all the other good leads, even ones that pointed to possible invaders. They would have had more likely suspects if they had looked in more places, especially where a crazy fan or attacker might have been. They didn't, though, and the case went on for 28 years. With the newest DNA technology, the puzzle is almost over. As strong as it seemed, the parents were not the only ones who could have done it. This is because JonBenét was hit with something heavy, which cracked her head, and then she was strangled with a gar. Most likely, her folks would not kill her in such a horrible way. He told Joe Berlinger, the documentary filmmaker who made Cold Case JonBenét Ramsey, that JonBenét died from being strangled with a gar. People who think that a mother would be smart or have the experience and knowledge to put their daughter through that kind of horrible death because she wet the bed shouldn't be believed. In fact, the parents almost went to jail on charges of endangering a child and being an accessory, but DA Alex Hunter decided not to file charges because there wasn't enough proof. In 2008, DNA testing showed that the male DNA belonged to an unknown person, which ended all suspicions about the Ramseys. Later, former DA Mary Lacey officially cleared the family, saying that they were the ones who were hurt by the crime. She also said that the cops had missed important evidence that didn't point to the Ramseys as guilty because they were too busy trying to prove the family's innocence. In 2013, investigators said that their main line of inquiry was an intruder idea because they saw clear signs of a male presence in the house that they couldn't identify. Over 1,600 people were thought to be persons of interest. This list included area burglars, registered sex offenders, and people with pageant ties. But they couldn't look into this at that time because they were mostly thinking about the family. The police were very interested in the parents, but they also thought that JonBenét's brother Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old at the time, might have been involved. Officially, Burke Ramsey was not a suspect. However, the DA, Alex Hunter, later said that Burke was not and never had been a suspect. Still, a lot of people, even the media, thought he was guilty. A documentary show on CBS called The Case of JonBenét Ramsey came out in 2016. CBS experts came to the conclusion that Burke, who was 9 years old, may have killed his sister by hitting her with a lamp after a fight over a pineapple. They used the fact that Burke hit her with a golf club in the past and the way he behaved in interviews as proof. Burke's fingerprints were found on a bowl and a teacup, which led to the so-called pineapple idea. JonBenét's gut had a pineapple that hadn't been broken down yet. Experts at CBS say that this could have been her last moment. Some of them also said that he was smiling and calm while being questioned by the cops. There is strong evidence that Burke and his family are not guilty of these claims. In answer, he sued CBS and pathologist Werner Spitz for libel, and the cases were settled in secret. Burke made a strong public statement in which he said, "You won't find any evidence because that's not what happened." He told Dr. Phil that he thinks his sister's murder was done by a stranger who was crazy about beauty pageants. Some people still think that the Burke did it idea makes sense. Some people think he was too young to abuse his sister so badly and then choke her after hitting her, while others think he did it and his parents are making it up to protect him. What do you think? Fill out the form below to share your ideas. One big problem with the JonBenét Ramsey story, though, was that they paid too much attention to the parents. Another problem was that the crime scene was dirty, which made the whole case a mess. When the police arrived, they only locked JonBenét's bedroom. This let his family, friends, and detectives easily move through the house, washing surfaces, touching evidence, and even moving JonBenét's body, which seriously compromised the integrity of forensic evidence. Solid proof. In fact, her father found her body in the basement and brought her upstairs instead of calling the police. During the probe, the police also didn't follow the rules very well. They didn't find JonBenét in the basement, but her father did find him hours after the 911 call. They didn't bring in crime scene dogs or quickly lock up the whole property. Also, the incident happened during Christmas, when departments were short-staffed and confused. Former police head Mark Beckner said it was the perfect storm, and he admitted that the investigation went in the wrong direction because of how it was handled. Even worse, important things like the gar, the ransom note, the rope, and the flashlight haven't been tested again by modern forensics, and some of them may still not be tested or have been lost. The ransom note is one of the puzzles that the police have not been able to solve in the case. The famous 3-page ransom note that Patty Ramsey found on the stairs on Christmas morning asked for $118,000. This was exactly the amount of John Ramsey's bonus, which made people immediately think that the person who wrote it knew a lot about the case. It was written with Patty's pen on paper from inside the house. The note was too long, too formal, and too dramatic. It quoted movies like Dirty Harry and Speed, made threats of killing, and signed with an acronym like SBTC. They were so confused by how strange it was that they wondered if it had been put there on purpose to throw off the investigation or if someone was trying to get money from John Ramsey. Handwriting origins have been discussed for a long time. Some people connected it to Patty. Others said someone pretending to be a thief wrote it. Jason Jensen, a private investigator in Utah, thought that SBTC might be using academic jargon like that used by University of Colorado Boulder students, which would point to a local attacker. Psychological profilers don't believe it because they think it's just a fake kidnapping note made to trick police. That strange phrase, "we advise you to be arrested," doesn't make sense to real kidnappers, say linguistic experts. Besides the ransom note, the cops looked into other clues at the crime scene. There was still some proof at the crime scene, even though it was dirty. JonBenét's father and brothers think that this information can be looked at again by the police and used to finally solve the case. Investigators found a scuffed open basement window with packing peanuts and leaves inside, as well as a bag under the window, which pointed to a possible way for someone to get in. A high-tech footprint found near JonBenét's body did not belong to any family member. Also, JonBenét was found strangled by a garrote that he made himself. It was a nylon cord wrapped around the handle of a paintbrush from Patsy's art tools. A similar, rough binding was seen on her wrist. Also, there was a lot of DNA, which is unusual for a case that hasn't been solved after all these years. Male DNA that didn't match the Ramseys was found under her toenails, in her underwear, on her gar, in her long johns, and on her wrist cord. However, they still don't know who the DNA goes to. Besides that, there were other traces. On the door to the wine cellar, a palm print was found. Fibers from a green Christmas wreath were found in her hair. The duct tape on her mouth wasn't from that place. And a rubber glove was discovered in some trash nearby. While police tried to figure out who killed JonBenét Ramsey, the media was busy following their every move and making fun of the family. The murder case of JonBenét Ramsey quickly went from being a serious piece of news to a trial shown on TV. Instead of focusing on facts that could be checked, most cable news and tabloids made the disaster seem more shocking to get more viewers. Notably, Geraldo Rivera's 1997 fake trial on the Geraldo Rivera show falsely found Patty and John Ramsey guilty before they were actually found guilty by a judge. This mixed entertainment with assumed guilt. Rivera later said sorry to everyone for the harm he caused. Tabloids spread even more bad news about the family by saying that Patty pushed JonBenét to compete in beauty pageants and that John had done something wrong. These claims were later proven to be false. Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old at the time, was even in the news, and his nervous emotions were shown as guilty smiles. Critics and journalists like Michael Tracy have called the coverage a public lynching and a media assassination, saying that it hurt the assumption of innocence by putting unproven speculation over the truth. People's views were skewed by the constant attention on the Ramsey family, which turned a tragedy into a show and, according to critics, made it easier for injustice to happen. In spite of all the demanding situations, the Ramsey-owned family have persevered to develop and are achieving fulfillment in different components of their life as additionally they look to remedy the mystery of JonBenét's homicide. John Ramsey remains the strongest advise for his daughter's homicide case to be solved. Due to the fact that Patty, his spouse, and JonBenét's mother surpassed away in 2006, he is nonetheless promoting renewed DNA trying out and is encouraging the authorities to renew investigating his daughter's demise. He splits his time among Michigan and Utah, married his 0.33 wife, Jan Rousseau, in 2011, and stays hopeful that current forensic strategies and outside specialists can convey justice. As for Burke Ramsey, he attended Purdue College and earned a degree in computer and records era, has stored a low public profile, now working as a software engineer in Michigan. He is married and lives privately with minimal public interest. He declined participation inside the Netflix docu-series, however broke his silence in 2016 on Dr. Phil, defending himself and helping the intruder principal. John Andrew Ramsey is JonBenét's one-half brother from John's first marriage. He has been a vocal advise for fixing the case, appeared inside the Netflix docu collection, and always criticizes police handling while urging for DNA-targeted research. The entire Own family is now targeted on making sure that the police pursue fresh DNA testing and in the long run discover JonBenét's real killer. With all of the portions eventually coming together, it seems like all this is left is for the government to retest the DNA and give the Ramsey family a few solutions. Which idea do you suspect is more likely for JonBenét's homicide? Allow recognize within the remark. Thank you for watching and we will see you next time.